Now, I'll give you a couple examples of where immunity can be overly upregulated, and there are just an infinite number of combinations. But we're looking at something, in the case of type 1 diabetes, it's well established that a significant, if not majority, of cases of type 1 diabetes are really where you have autoimmune damage to the beta cells. It's been well established again that inflammation and destruction of the beta cells can be driven by chronic exposure to gluten, again, a type of gluten. It can be also driven by particular patterns of dysbiosis. And similar patterns of dysbiosis, if not driving type 1 diabetes, have also been linked to rheumatoid arthritis. And again, other autoimmune conditions that may be affecting respiratory function or nervous function. But systemically, dysbiosis has the ability to influence autoimmunity and to deregulate immune function. When it comes to heart disease, there is also really good evidence that leukocyte adhesion, which is an important part of the etiology of cardiovascular disease, having that leukocyte adhesion, having the oxidized low-density lipoproteins infiltrate the artery lining, this is accelerated by leukocyte adhesion. And those leukocytes, or those red blood cells, become much more likely to adhere when they are inflamed and they're upregulated by a variety of substances that may be either liable or may have to be in systemic circulation. Bacterial populations, and they can activate these lipopolysaccharides produced by primarily gram-negative bacteria, can activate a white blood cell and can really increase, because of the inflammation that will occur when that white blood cell is activated, can significantly increase the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. This is going to cause problems with neuron health, and cause microglial type development. And when I say certain microbial populations have the ability to generate these lipopolysaccharides, they're predominantly gram-negative bacteria. Some examples of microbiology. Many of these, not all of them, some are benign commensal bacteria, but many of the more problematic pathogens are gram-negative, such as the Shigella producing, toxin-producing gram-negative bacteria, Salmonella. Klebsiella is one that I have always had on my radar, of course, with people clinically, because Klebsiella is really implicated, or Klebsiella overgrowth, I should say, is implicated in a host of autoimmune conditions because of how innate it is in producing a variety of substances that are often misinterpreted by our immune systems. And I think, using Klebsiella pneumonia as an example of where a specific type of dysbiosis or the presence of a pathogen can initiate inflammation and autoimmunity is one of the best examples I can give. It's really fascinating. So Klebsiella is something that many of us carry in at least small numbers within our GI. What the percentage or the population of a Klebsiella family of bacteria has to get to where it's an issue is it's an important question. I don't think we know definitively yet, but certainly higher levels of Klebsiella are a risk factor for a variety of autoimmune diseases, and this is really how it unfolds. Klebsiella, in response to dietary starch, produces an enzyme that helps it digest the starch. That enzyme is a mouthful that's called a pololinase, and a pololinase produced by this family of bacteria helps digest highly branched starches, which we call amylopectin. Now, this pololinase, which is an enzyme, is in contact with our brushwater, our intestinal lining. Unfortunately, it has a very, very similar amino acid sequence to a variety of collagen types in the human body. What happens is when that pololinase reaches the brush lining, and it's a constant exposure of the immune system. You can see on this slide that a variety of polinases are used to degrade this amylopectin into smaller glucose chains or smaller liposaccharides. That pololinase is interpreted by our immune system eventually as a pathogen. And because Klebsiella is chronically producing this enzyme to digest the starch in our diet, and we're feeding the Klebsiella population by eating significant quantities of dietary starch, then we have an overproduction of this enzyme. It is interpreted by the immune system as a threat or a pathogenic invader. And then eventually, because of this similarity to the protein code that makes up the enzyme and the protein code of our collagen, eventually our immune system starts to attack our own collagen. And this is, in essence, ankylosing spondylitis, a debilitating autoimmune disease that is growing in terms of its incidence. And one of the most effective ways to mitigate symptoms or to treat this condition is by placing an individual with ankylosing spondylitis on the appropriate antibiotic-based treatment and a low starch, or in particular, a low amylopectin-containing diet. That would be, for instance, like potatoes. They're very rich source of amylopectin, as opposed to amylose, which can be found at higher concentrations in, let's say, rice. So this is just one example of a particular type of dysbiosis that is found when we have Klebsiella overgrowth. But there are Yes.
Can I just interrupt? Your mic is a bit scratchy. Is there any adjustment you can make? Background noise.
Let me unplug my... Is that any better?
I believe so, yeah. That's a good way to connect you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So these different families of gram-negative bacteria that overgrow or become a real dominant force within the GI, those are sources of dysbiosis, and ultimately it's just one example. There are others such as the Shigella bacteria in Crohn's disease as well, Citrobacter, and ulcerative colitis. And really the keys to understanding or addressing these are to recognize the sources of flora as an imbalance and overgrowth. That's where the inflammation is really coming from. So correcting this may involve antibiotic therapy. It may the other substances may be used as well to shift populations, whether it be botanical oils or other things. But ultimately, it's really important to consider dietary manipulation because that's what will affect the metabolism of some of these pathogens. And whether Klebsiella might require a low amylopectin or a low starch diet, sometimes referred to as the London diet. But if someone had Shigella overgrowth, I would recommend a diet that was very low in the sialic acid, NAU, 5-GC. Now that diet would be really low in red meat or no red meat. It would be very low in dairy, maybe no dairy, but would contain eggs and fish, which are basically free of that form of sialic acid, NAU, 5-GC. The same might be true of Hashimoto's as well, because certain metabolites are much more important for particular families of bacteria that have become pathogenic. So we'll try to leave a good amount of time for questions towards the end of this. So the next area where dietary factors can drive inflammation would look at the role of substances that influence one of these gatekeepers to that level of intestinal permeability or those tight junctions. One of those gatekeepers is referred to as an inflammasome. An inflammasome is really the best way to describe it is a complex structure of proteins that regulate both gene expression and protein production within a cell. And these inflammasomes are in almost all cells, and they really influence what happens at the surface of the cell that's produced for proteins that, in the case of the gut lining, can really open or close doorways and can produce substances that are going to trigger inflammatory cascades, like interleukins, for instance. Inflammasomes are in constant contact with every aspect of our diet, every ingredient, every molecule within our diet ultimately has the ability to upregulate or downregulate this inflammasome activity. And when we look at some of the more potent examples of inflammasome-stimulating substances, they are also quite often highly interactive with another important gatekeeper of the intestinal lining, which are called inducible heat shock proteins. And the abbreviation on this slide would be IHSP. So an inducible heat shock protein is really a protein that also controls the entry of substances between cells. In the case of the intestinal lining, they can help repair damage and some of the opening or permeability that may have been generated by something like zonulin. So these inducible heat shock proteins, coupled with the overall inflammasome response within a cell, together play pivotal roles as gatekeepers. They're going to keep substances out of the blood. They're going to keep substances out of circulation that can drive inflammation through high or condition-producing, symptom-producing, or disease-causing levels. So these are two really important mechanisms to understand. And some of the substances that are very potent inflammasome and inducible heat shock protein altering ingredients are found in a wide variety of plants, and they're called lectins. Now, lectins ultimately are produced by plants in an effort to defend themselves against a variety of pests. Those pests may be insects, they may be herbivores that are grazing on a particular food. But lectins defend the plant in the area of botany. They are the primary defense mechanism used by plants against a variety of pressures within their ecosystem. Most lectins have an ability to make either the red blood cells or the white blood cells, for instance, in an animal, agglutinate or form these clumps. Again, I'm showing this slide from the reference that you see at the bottom of the slide, so that it becomes clear that there are certain sources of dietary lectins which are much more well studied and well understood than others. And on this slide, you see Phaseolus vulgaris, that's the kidney bean. Another example, which is Dolichos floris, the third one down, that's the cow pea. These are very common legumes that are consumed, typically infrequently by most populations in the world, but some people develop dietary habits or practices where they eat one of these things quite regularly, and they have adverse effects on people. Sometimes it's much more so on one individual than the other, but these are prime examples of glucoagglutinators, and in the case of the cowpea, a hemogglutinator. They really cause problems for white and red blood cells. So they're considered toxins in the field of toxicology. And, for people that dive into this deeper, there are some references I can share with you, again, towards the end of this talk. But lectins are, they're naturally occurring, even though they are part of a plant-based diet, can be significant sources of inflammation because of the way they affect hemodynamics or the way they affect the gut lining. And really, to clearly understand that, it's just important to know that something like the cowpea, for instance, the lectin that has been isolated from the cowpea, this is true of other legumes, these have been used for decades as methods. Once they're isolated, they've been used as methods of selecting, or I should say screening, for certain blood types. So when labs are trying to look for certain patterns of type A blood, they use the lectin isolated from the cowpea to make those red blood cells, blood of type A blood, agglutinate, so that it can be used as a screening tool. This is not new information in the area of hemodynamics and toxicology. It's only new, really, when I present this to clinicians of all types, and they start to understand that these lectins survive human digestion. They survive cooking time. Really doesn't produce a significant drop-off in the lectin content of kidney beans. It's an example of a type of legume. It just isn't that compatible with human physiology because of the lectin concentration. And it really comes down to the communication that we're talking about here, all in the topic of inflammation. The inflammasome is upregulated with exposure to these agglutinators, to these lectins. And just like it is when certain bacterial populations are in greater quantities, there's an ability to downregulate that inflammasome. And again, the best example would be your lactobacilli, strains of gram-positive bacteria. Those are commonly found in yogurt. Rhamnosus is another excellent example of a bacteria which is known to downregulate the inflammasome, the inflammasome reaction. And when it comes to inducible heat shock proteins, our goal is to keep those upregulated so that we have a good, tight intestinal lining without that permeability and less inflammation. And similar families of bacteria that we know have better associations with most types of health, whether you're talking about digestive health or neurological health, it's really the same families of bacteria we want to have larger populations of when it comes to upregulating. That's a good thing. Inducible heat shock proteins, those are the bifidobacter family. It's, again, the lactobacilli, the rhamnosus. These are also very beneficial when it comes to upregulating inducible heat shock proteins. So these lectins are a part of it. They're a part of the big picture here. But every bit as important, or maybe even more critical component, is to having well-diverse and well-represented families, important families of bacteria. But the research on lectins in a wide variety of chronic diseases that range from autoimmune type to neurological diseases is well established. I think it should give all of us reason for many of our patients to consider a more carbohydrate-specific or low lectin, certain types of lectins at least, a lower lectin-containing diet. Again, it's not to say that all lectins do harm. We're going to talk really about the most damaging forms of lectins. The two that are the most damaging are the lectins found in your large, broad beans, which would be kidney beans, fava beans, these larger beans, and wheat germ. The wheat germ WGA is every bit as destructive as the hemogglutinator found in kidney beans. PHA and WGA are really the most damaging agglutinators that have been studied to date. I would say that after looking at this research for the last 20 years, I feel very strongly that people do better without wheat germ and do much better without kidney beans, all people, than they do with them. It's really just common sense that I feel at this point to recommend diets, especially for people who have gut issues, high levels of inflammation. Recommend diets that contain either of those. But here's some other references that you may find interesting.